Hi, and welcome to another episode. This time, we have changed the name. Juan, do you want to tell them the new name?
Oh, you just jumped into it.
Yes, I did. So, or did you want to start off with our same intro as last time?
No.
No, is this okay?
No, so I guess we should start at the beginning. We should just jump in and get started, right? So we did change the name. I guess we called it a rebrand. We rebranded the podcast, and we basically changed the name because from the beginning when we started the podcast, I think you weren't 100% sold on the name, and I was like, I don't know if it really makes sense because it's Juan of Words, yeah, like that's the blog that we had, but I was like, I don't know if it makes sense since it's both of us.
You're such a liar. Why don't you say what you said at the beginning?
What did I say? I said at the beginning, I was like, but it makes sense because it's what we already have established. It's the name that's already out there everywhere.
Yeah.
And then you were like, I don't care, like just name it whatever, and I
got frustrated at the end. I was like, you know what? Just it is what it is. Just name it whatever. Let's just get started. I didn't want to get stuck on it.
Yeah. So that anyway. So we named it. We need to name it. We kept going with Juan of Words, and then
So Juan of Words is the podcast name. It's not the podcast name. I'm so sorry. It
was the podcast name.
No. It's your blog name, and it's what you've
since 2010.
Did you call that beer earlier?
No, I said I need to open this.
Oh, I thought I understood. I need to open this beer before we started, and I was like, "That's not beer."
Let me clarify. This is sparkling water.
Yes. I looked at it right now. I was like, "That's not beer."
No.
Okay.
Anyway, so we had called the podcast Juan of Words, and it had been Juan of Words since we had it. It's been Juan of Words for like years now. And then the other day I was in bed and I was like, you know what? I think we've been doing it for so long enough that I think it's probably time to change the name. And then I just a lot of times ideas will come to me late at night, Juan, late in the evening or when I'm laying down.
I think the name has been a topic of discussion, not the first time when we started the podcast, but as we continued, because it kept being named Juan of Words. And I think for a long time, I kind of just went along with whatever, just so, to make things easier and just to make things go, and not get stuck in names, basically, not to get stuck in names. But I was like, Juan, it's called Juan of Words podcast. My name is not Juan. And we've had this discussion before where I was like, I feel like I am part of the podcast, but I feel like there's still ownership over it. And you were kind of the owner. And I was like, I don't, it's hard for me to invest my time into something that I feel like I'm not a part of, even though we are married, even though it is part of me. I was like, can we establish more to this? And again, the argument was always look, Juan of Words is established. It's already out there. It is what it is. Let's not ruffle. Let's not start confusing people. Let's just it is what it is. And I was like, okay, and I just went with it. That's the honest to God truth.
Okay, and then so
why do you say okay like that for?
Because I think you wanted to finish that. I was trying to tell a story, but I want you to finish that point so we can so I can tell the story.
So we can move on. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So my thing was so I don't think you ever were fully sold on the name. So we were like, okay, it is what it is, and it was Juan of Words, because that's what was the most known. So anyways, I was the other day I was laying down and I just was like, well, you know what? I wonder what we would rename it, because that was always part of the conversation. Was well, what do we call it? If we don't call it Juan of Words, what do we call it? And we could never agree on anything. We could never figure out okay, what this is the name or that's the name that we want to go with. So it was always kind of okay, just leave it. And I had brought it up before, and you were like, you know what? Well, eventually we'll change it. Maybe next year.
That's not.
Maybe next year or whatever.
That's not the way it went down. And I'm not trying to have a discussion argument. I'm just trying to be sincere.
It sounds like you are.
No, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to be sincere about it. I'm trying to be honest.
I don't think
I'm
trying not to be sincere. I think I'm just sharing my perspective, and you're sharing yours, and you're
no, definitely. I understand that.
You're the one getting frustrated.
I am getting frustrated because that's not the way. That's not the tally of the situation.
All right, well, let's let Angelica tell us the way it happened.
Oh, let's let Angelica tell the story. I see.
No, because that way you can't say that I'm changing the narrative. Then you say the story.
I mean, I get it. I get you're stating, I think, your narrative of the way things you're establishing the way you think.
But I'm not
your perception of it.
Yeah.
And I think the truth. Okay, so I have this thing about for me at least, it's if I say the whole thing, don't hold back. Nothing. There was no ill
Well, what am I holding back that you're so hung up on?
But this is what I'm saying. There was no ill malice in what you were trying to do from when you were establishing the name Juan and Words podcast. There was nothing wrong. There was no ill like malice to it, but that wasn't the honest like the trajectory of what happened was from the beginning. I was told like Juan and Words podcast is already existing and we should go with it. And I was like, okay, but you know what? And I had brought it up several times. I was like, it's not that it's my name. It's that there's nothing. It's called Juan of Words. So it's JUAN, which is your name of words. And it relates back to your blog that has been existing for over 10 years. And I was like, it's yours, and I was like, I feel like I want to be included because I feel like from the beginning I was excluded, right? Because it was already established, and I didn't want to keep like bringing it up. I didn't want to feel. I kept going with the narrative. He's right. But then I was still stuck in the fact of like, but we're building it together. I understand it's building together, but it's still his name, and so. In an argument, actually, not like a full-on blown argument, but a back and forth with me and Juan, we had brought that up again. And I think the way it was brought up, I think it kind of clicked to you. You were like, you're right. I think that the name should be like rebranded and we should rename the blog. And that was a few months ago. We had brought that up. And I was like, and then that's when we couldn't come up with like a name or something. Like we kept like throwing names out there and we were like, okay, well, it doesn't make any sense for us to do this, or that doesn't really like, it doesn't go with like what we're doing at the moment. And we always wanted to keep the name in reference to who we are and what we do.
Well, and I remember that conversation happening earlier than a couple months ago, but that's neither here nor there. But what I say,
but he just had to bring it up.
But what you said something but you said something right now that I want to go back to, because you said that you felt you were excluded. So my question is, so you felt like from the beginning, I was purposely excluding you from like from the blog, and I was excluding you from the podcast, and I was excluding you from things?
No, I didn't feel like I was being excluded. I felt like
But you used the word.
No, I understand that. I felt like I was excluded.
From what?
I was being excluded like from like it having ownership for both of us. I felt like it was, but I understood what you were saying. I understood that you were saying that, like, I've already established Juan of Words. Juan of Words is already recognized when when people in the industry talk about me and Juan, they always go reference back to his blog. So I got it. Like, I understood that. But there was, like, just a thing for me where I was like, but that's not who we are now. That's not what's happening, like, now. And you're really going to have to excuse me because I'm still sick. Like, I'm not that I'm sick. I have allergies. And so I have, like, I'm congested, like, all up in here. So I sound nasally. Okay, so anyway, so going back to the topic, the conversation was just...
But you did feel excluded, and you felt excluded by me.
I felt...
like what you're saying.
Like, even if it was you who brought it up or if it was somebody else, I still understood why it was going to be called Juan of Words podcast, because it was already established.
No, but put the name aside. But what I'm curious about is the exclusion. Put the name aside. I think, but the thing is, like, that you felt excluded, and you felt the person that was excluding you was me, and that's my thing. Is like,
because you were the one trying to make sense of it.
But what did you think that I was trying to exclude you from?
I'm not really sure. That's what I'm trying to explain, though. I don't think there was, like, because we didn't start off and there was, like, we had, like, like somebody supporting it in terms of, like, monetary, and there was nothing on paper that said I own the podcast. So I'm not really saying that there was an exclusion because I thought you were going to gain something out of it. I thought you were making sense to me, and I was just like, yeah, it does make sense what he's saying, but it still doesn't feel like at my, like, core thought, I was like, but I'm still not, I'm part of it, but it still is not, like, because it in the words itself, in the actual words itself, Juan of Words was you. So I understood, but I still feel like have you ever heard, lately people have been saying this, two things can be right at the same time? I understood where you were coming from, but I still feel excluded. So, like, I was like, not that there was turmoil within me, but I was just I wanted to express, like, hey, I don't feel like I feel like it's not ownership for both of us. I feel like it's yours. I feel like you know, you worked really hard. So did I, on like your blog and branding and getting yourself out there and being out there. But that's not where we are anymore. Like it's not about like just branding Juan of Words. It's about like, hey, let's do something together. Let's collectively do something together. Where it's Angelica and Juan, or Juan and Angelica. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You don't get it, do you?
No, I'm just listening because I'm waiting for you to like explain. Pause. Because I think like the way it's coming off is like you're like making it sound like I purposely like excluded you, and then I was like I owned on paper somewhere. Then I was like, no, this is mine and this belongs to me, and like I held that like over your head, and I was like, no, this belongs to me. You don't own anything, and that you don't have any ownership of this, and that wasn't the case. So like I just
it's
that's
not
why
like
I'm like
all in.
That's why I asked you, because I was like, okay, well, I don't feel like I was really
definite.
taking anything away.
Yeah, no, I understand that. What I'm saying is it's not definite. Like there's no definite that I'm saying. There's not like it's black and white. It's not here nor there. There's the gray in between, and that's where we were falling, and it was the gray in between.
I know, but
so
when you
can't say that you're
like,
doing bad.
But when you say things like I was being excluded, or you're lying, or you're not being sincere, then it gives the
illusion.
It gives the person on the other side listening that doesn't know us the impression that like I'm like you're good and I'm bad, or like you're the victim and I'm the oppressor.
You can't think like that.
And I think that that's a little misguiding.
Okay, you're right. You can think however you please, but I feel like that's not the truth. And for me to sit here and say, yeah, we were thinking of names and we could never come up with anything, so we just went with Juan of Words. I'm like, that's not the truth. That's not what happened.
But we did have the conversation, and we didn't come up with a name.
No, but after so much conversation, after me trying to get you to understand why I wanted it to be different aside of Juan of Words, after that, there was a lot of, let's be honest, there was a lot of convincing on my part to be like, hey, can we reconsider? Hey, can we revisit this? Hey, from the beginning, I was very much, and then there was a moment where I had to, I think we were discussing something completely separate and different outside of the podcast, but I was like, you know what, the name, this is my problem, because it keeps going back to like, hey, like I want to be able to like have some kind of not ownership, but if I feel like I'm included, then that means that I feel like I can partake in it, and more so in the sense of like I can give more than even what I want. And I feel like with my Latina Leadership Series, like I have ownership of it, right? And you've seen how much I poured into it. You've seen how much I've done with it.
Right, and the thing is, like, I've never tried to take anything away from that, and I don't mean, and my intention is not to, by questioning you, is not to corner you or to make you feel like you have to explain yourself, but my intention is just to say, hey,
to make sure the listener
to
doesn't
just defend
seem
myself,
like
and
I know,
and be like, I'm not like the asshole here that was like, oh, you don't have anything, and I don't want it. I can't just like sit back and be like, oh yeah, like no, like you're right, because that's not true. Like that's not the way that's not the way it happened.
I know where your mindset was coming, and I had to be one to understand that there was no malintent on your behalf, and I had to understand that. But I had to continue to express like, hey, I want to also feel like I can pour into this, but so it can't be named Juan of Words. It can't be Juan of Words. I understand that I'm associated with it, but that's just it. I'm associated with it. It's not me and you. It's called Juan. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes sense, and I understand, and I can acknowledge. I don't think that we ever like fought about it, but I can acknowledge that I was like, you had to convince me a little bit, because I was like, well, we spent 10 years building Juan of Words, so why start new? I don't think that we ever like argued where we were like fighting about it. I think it was just like my point. I was trying to get you to see my point. And you were trying to get me to your point.
There was some frustration on my end.
Yeah,
I don't think we ever fought about it, but there was frustration about it.
It wasn't like where we were like, oh my God, like don't talk to me for the next 2 hours because I'm mad. No, it was never like that. It was just
it wasn't that
it was
deep.
just like you had your point of view, I had mine, and we couldn't come to a good consensus. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you got frustrated to the point where you were like, you know what, name it, keep the name, I don't care.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, until we come up with something better, then I'm just gonna keep the name.
I know you're so. The problem with me sometimes with you, Juan, is that you're there's this practicalness to you where you're just like, okay, well, this is just the way it's going to be. It's like, no, can you think about it? And you're like, no, there's nothing to think about because it's going to happen. And we need to do it in this manner. Like, let's push it along. Like, I don't want to pause. I don't want to do anything else. And I was like, okay, fine. But then my whole, like, my like, I call it my little black soul. Like, my black little soul wasn't into it. And I was like, okay, well, I guess he's going to take it on then. You know, I poured a little bit into it. And I was like, you know what? I want to do my own. I want to do the Latina Leadership Series. And I started pouring myself into that one. And I was like, I guess, you know, Juan can take over the podcast and he'll just let me know when to record. And, we didn't record. Not that you didn't record, not that you didn't come up with it, but there was you kept asking me, you're like, you don't want to do it anymore? And I was like, no, I want to do it still. And you're like, yeah, but you're not saying, hey, this is a topic I want to talk about. Like, sometimes we would take like drives, like now that we're driving back and forth from Texas to Arkansas, in those interims, we have conversations about kind of topics that we want to talk about, and we talk about ideas, and we weren't doing any of that.
Mm-hmm. But I think it was like, I mean, I think that it was just, I think like I was busy. So I was like, I'm not, you know, I want to record. Like, it was in the back of my mind, but I was just like, you know, I will get around to it eventually.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, Angelica will eventually approach me and tell me she wants to record.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Because that's what I did. Yeah.
When you never did, I was like, okay, well then maybe
she doesn't want to.
Maybe I just need to we just need to like forget about the podcast, and she's already growing her podcast. And I was like, you know, we had a good run.
But we love it,
and it was fun. And I'm like, but I don't. The thing is, like, I don't want to force anything. So to me, it's like, if it's forced, then I don't want to do it. You know, if it's natural and it feels like we want to do it, we both want to do it, then let's do it.
I said it from the very beginning.
Like forced, I was like, I mean, it doesn't feel fun when it feels forced.
I said from the very beginning, Juan, that, like, you know, doing podcasting and video podcasting, it has a charm for me, and it's never lost its charm. And I feel like the more I continue to do other things with podcasting, whether it's producing, whether it's like doing, watching somebody else, branding somebody else's podcast, like, it has its charm for me, and it's never lost its charm for me. And I love my series. I love the new series that I have. I love all the things that I do. And so it's not that I don't want to. It's just that I'm like, okay, well, at one point I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm helping Juan. He'll let me know. He'll let me know what he wants to do. He'll let me know what he wants to do with the podcast. He'll, you know, whatever. And you kept asking me, like, hey, so you don't want to podcast anymore? I was like, no, I still do. But you got to let me know what's up. Like, let me know when you want to do it, or if you want to bring up the conversation. Do you want me to bring it? Like, I was like, okay, I'm ready for you to produce a podcast. I'm ready for you to direct me on what to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
No?
No, my mind just went somewhere else. But
Why? What did you think about?
You're like, I'm ready for you to direct me. And I'm like, oh, okay. Anyways.
Okay.
So that long introduction, that long argument, that long bickering session. Sorry for you guys that were listening or watching us.
You apologize on your behalf. I'm not sorry.
For having to like sit through this like bickering session of us like arguing about the backstory to this. But anyways, what my point was before we started arguing was that like so the other day I was laying in bed and I couldn't go to sleep for whatever reason, and that's usually when I start thinking of ideas, and then I couldn't sleep, and then I thought about the expression "in the business," and I was like, you know what? In the business has like double meaning sometimes, because in the business, like, you can mean it like, yeah, you know about business, you're involved with like entrepreneurship and this and that, but it could also mean like you're metiches, right? Like
you're like in somebody's business.
Yeah, you're in somebody's business, and I was like, oh, isn't that funny? It's like we.
That's who we.
I was like, we came out as los metiches. Like when we were first coming out, people we gave ourselves a name that we're los metiches. And
some people still come to us and they're like, oh, los metiches. I remember that.
Yeah.
We'd go to conferences or like events and be like, oh, los metiches. Don't. We were like, no.
and the reason that we called ourselves los metiches is because our blog was a culture blog, and we were really like kind of like just kind of poking fun at ourselves and saying that we were always like always were in the know, or we were always trying to get into the, like we were always trying to like insert ourselves into things, and to a certain degree that was true.
Oh, we still are like that.
Yeah, but it wasn't like never with bad intentions or anything like that. It was just like because we were just nosy.
To be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, that's cool that it kind of means metiche, but at the same time it means business. And really business is a lot of what we do now is like consumes a majority of our life is like us running our own businesses. And
that's our entire livelihood.
And then I was like, in the business with Juan and Anjelica. I was like, and then
it has this double meaning, so we like that. Yeah. That was an amazing name. Like, good call. Yeah.
And then the next day I was like, when I woke up, or when you woke up, I was like, hey, so
what do you think about this?
I was like, what do you think about this name? And like, she didn't like argue with me. She didn't say nah. She was like, I like it. And I was like, wait, do you like it, or you're just saying whatever because you just don't care? You're just like, name it whatever you want. And I was like,
no.
And she was like, no, I liked it. I like it. And I was like, okay, because I'm gonna change like the name to the podcast now. And she was like, okay.
No, I was like, okay. I think it's awesome. I think it's cool. I think it's amazing.
So I even came up with a little tagline.
Oh, what's the tagline?
I don't remember the tagline, so I have to read it because I just posted it on Instagram today that the name was changing, and I was like, I wasn't even planning it. I just was like, I'll post it today. I said, we are in the business, and we know a thing or two about business too. And we are in the business.
And this is why Juan is known as Juan of Words. He loves to play on words. Like my husband is an amazing writer, and I will say this to the day I die. My husband is an amazing writer, very creative in writing. I've always loved your writing, and you know that. And so I like the fact that you came back with something that you were like, I think I can do something with this. And you kind of gave effort to it. And I was like, hell yeah, that's pretty cool.
Well, thank you. And I was like, well, I think it makes sense. I mean, I feel like it fits us more where we are today in our lives. And it really is more about that, like who we are, what we are doing today. And I think, because to a certain extent, like I'll admit that I felt like, I kind of felt like, I was like, well, I feel like Juan of Words almost feels like me like 10 years ago. Like it feels like the maturity level that I had 10 years ago. Not that I was
immature.
I don't know. Like I just feel like it just didn't feel like a grown up.
Like the you version
like
of
the grown up me. I feel like the in process grown up of me. Like growing up, and I'm like, I feel like I'm not growing. I'm sure I'm still growing up, but I'm like, I feel like I'm not like growing up that way anymore. So I was like,
you have more experience.
Yeah, I feel like more experience. Like I feel like I have more life experience, more everything. So I was just like, I feel like that name como que no me queda tanto. I still like the name, and I was like, I'm not willing to let it go and be like.
So, but what I also wanted to change was like the setup right here. Like, well, at some point we'll have like something here so we're facing each other.
Oh yeah,
to like better talk to each other too. So there's gonna be a little shifts and changes around here, like coming around, and I'm like excited again to get back in here with you.
Well, so am I, and so now I'll say welcome to In the Business with Juan and Alanis.
It's gonna take some time. It's gonna take some time.
So welcome to In the Business with Juan and Anjelica.
Welcome to In the Business with Anjelica and Juan.
Yeah, I'm Juan Alanis.
And I'm Anjelica Casares. Did you hear that change up, Juan?
Yeah, I did.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. So welcome to In the Business with Juan and Anjelica. My name is Anjelica Casares.
And I'm Juan Alanis. Thank you for being here.
Hi, and welcome to another episode. Thank you so much. I think this is going to be an amazing podcast. I think, as we said earlier in the episode, I think it's going to be an amazing process to grow a little bit differently. I think the conversations are going to be kind of the same, but I think now that we have a different name, I think we can relate to it a little bit different, whether it's relating to those who are interested in the entrepreneurship world, in the podcasting world, in relationship, in like the dual like thingness of a female male type of podcast, or conversations out of a wife and husband in the space, being raised Mexican American, both as first generation from immigrant parents. I think there's a lot of information. There's a lot of like quality that we can provide and offer. And I'm happy. I'm happy we're back in the seats. I'm happy we're back behind the mics together. I think there's so much that we can give Yeah.
And I think the other thing is like the podcast being like the new kind of brand that it has is like in the business is like that we can talk about different things that maybe we didn't talk about before, but that we had been having conversations with each other, with other people about anyway. So I think like there's conversations that probably you might want to have, that, where I don't have to be there, and conversations that I might want to have, and it might just be like solo off and stuff like that. So I think it's gonna be like it gives us a lot of room to just kind of do whatever makes sense for the blog or for the podcast.
See, it's ingrained in us, man. It's hard to let go sometimes. But for the podcast, that we can bring on series. We can bring on interview guests differently. Juan has always interviewed guests on the podcast in terms of like.
But it's always kind of felt a bit disconnected because it's kind of like been like, oh, it's the Juan and Weird podcast, and then all of a sudden there's like a guest, and you're like, okay, like that was kind of weird. Like, where's Angelica? But I think this gives it a little bit more room so that if I'm not here, but Angelica's with a guest, then it's like, oh, okay, like she's talking about one of the topics they talk about.
So when you think about in the business, know that we're talking about in the know, whether that's business, entrepreneurship, in the know of our community, in the know of all of it. Not all of it, not everything under the sun, but things that you have related to us. And now we can include an addition to different series, different conversations. We can add more to it. Like I said, I think there's a lot of value that we can add.
Man, and I think is like the thing about a business is like one of the things that we realize is that being in business, there are a lot of things that you don't really know and you're not really taught until you actually do it. And so, the little, like, I won't say the little bit, but like what we've been managed to learn or what we've been to this point in our business, I think, it's worth sharing, you know, and it's worth like trying to like put it out there or like talk about, because I think it might help somebody else, you know, it might help somebody else to like be able to say, hey, you know what? Oh, I didn't know that you had to do this or that. And like, I heard it on this podcast and now I don't have to jump through that hoop.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, to jump to that hoop that we had to jump through because we didn't know any better.
Yeah. What I did want to say is, though, like Juan said earlier, none of these conversations are going to be forced. So are we going to force ourselves to talk about entrepreneurship? Absolutely not. Are we going to force ourselves to bring on guests? Absolutely not. This should come from a place that we really want to, because we do this podcast out of like the love of being behind these mics and cameras. So all of this is going to be as natural completely as possible. If we have people who want to come on here and have conversations about something that we talked about previous in a different like conversation, and if it makes sense to like add to it to bring on a guest, that's what we're going to do. So all of this, like as Juan said earlier, it's going to, nothing's going to be forced. It's going to be an existing podcast, and I'm happy to continue it with you, Juan.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think let's stop this episode and then we can do another one.
Okay, yeah.
Because I think we extended it at the beginning with like our like argument. So let's leave this one as kind of our like
argument. Oh my god.
Let's leave this one as our like intro to the new name.
Yeah.
And that's what it'll be. But we'll do another one where we just talk about an actual topic.
Yeah. But so welcome to the new rebranded name, formerly known as Juan of Words, and now it's In the Business with Juan and Angelica. My name is Angelica Casares.
And I'm Juan Alanis.
And we'll see you
on the next one.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.